Dare to enter Crow's Quill's books, where tales of forgotten realms and fearless souls come alive. Today's journey, Plato Wyngard and the Valley of the Immortals, chapters 25 to 26, by Mark and James Lindsay. Will you uncover the truth hidden in the shadows? Chapter 25. It was early in the morning when Captain Schmidt roused his passengers from their slumber. The combination of exhaustion, full stomachs, and sleep had made them all groggy and sluggish. This was rectified by strong, hot coffee that Luther would later swear made the spoons in their cups sit straight up. "I realize that there's a reason why you have woken us so early, as we're still hours from reaching our destination," Plato said. "We're drifting through a troublesome patch of the river," Captain Schmidt advised. "Troublesome how?" Luther asked. "For the next 10 kilometers, this stretch of river is used by the Red Scorpions, pirates that call the Dogleg River home," Captain Schmidt said. "You told us that you frequently travel along here. Why is this now a matter of concern?" Plato said. "Normally this wouldn't be trouble except for one thing." "And what's that?" Bian asked. "Well, you," Captain Schmidt said awkwardly. "Us," they replied in unison. Captain Schmidt produced a piece of paper from his pocket. Opening it carefully, he laid it down for all to see. It was a notice of bounty. 20,000 Vietnamese dong for any information that leads to the capture of 2 men, Luther Macbeth and Plato Wyngard. Below their names, 2 rough pictures that had been taken from a distance. "Well, they got that right," Luther said. "What's that?" Plato replied. "My name's first on the bounty. They obviously know who the more dangerous of the 2 is," Luther said with a smirk. "Second banana, more likely," Plato muttered. "So why are you telling us now about the pirates, and why didn't you tell us about the bounty?" Bian fumed. "It's really not what you think. This bounty has been sent out everywhere. I merely kept a copy on the off chance that this passage became compromised, and that you proved to be unsavory characters who might threaten my crew and ship. And as for the Red Scorpions, well, no one can guess how they will react to your presence. But I assure you that I mean you no ill intent. My first priority is to my men. Any passage that I undertake can become complicated," Captain Schmidt said diplomatically. "I believe you," Plato remarked. "I am curious, though. That's a lot of money, and you hold no allegiance to us," Luther noted. "As tempting as the bounty sounds, and despite my foreign birthright, I am well aware of the evil that is General Thun. You have paid for passage, and my duty is seeing you there in the same condition in with which we departed," Captain Schmidt said. "I appreciate that," Plato said. "Captain!" a voice called out from the front deck. Captain Schmidt peered out from the window and sighed. "Well, I guess we're about to find out," Captain Schmidt muttered as he watched several smaller vessels approaching. Luther pulled out a magnum revolver from his holster, cocking the hammer noisily back. "I wouldn't bother. They have at least a dozen high-caliber guns pointed at us by now," the captain said. Plato and Luther resisted every natural urge in their bodies that screamed for action, and did nothing as 5 ratty but well-armed men boarded the squid-laden boat with guns drawn. Chapter 26. Captain Schmidt and his guests remained calm, and more importantly, still, as the pirates took control of the MFV. Everyone knew that any form of resistance would be met with harsh force, and despite the fire in their bellies, they knew that the outcome of a counterattack would be uncertain, so for the present, they would be the compliant hosts to their new guests. Once the boat was secure, a large figure emerged from the lead vessel. Plato surmised that this was the commander of the pirate force. Nat was about to move and take a better view of the commander when one of the pirates grabbed him by the arm. "Get your hands off me, dog!" Nat growled and threw an elbow into the pirate's midriff, knocking the wind out of him. Two other pirates were quick to grab Nat and force him to the ground, the larger of the two placing a knee on the back of Nat's neck, preventing further disobedience. "Is that really necessary?" Luther growled, the veins on his forearms bulging as he tensed and flexed his knuckles, the pirates glaring warily, waiting for the large man to make his move. The captain's cabin had grown tense, both parties knowing that in the tight confines it could prove deadly for all if anyone decided to do something stupid. The door to the cabin creaked open, and 3 pirates entered. The large one, whom Plato assumed was the commander, casually grabbed a chair and sat down. He was the same height as the rest of his men, but what he lacked vertically, he made up for in robust muscle. Dressed in loose, dark clothing and strong leather sandals, the commander was also armed with a machete and large-caliber revolver that he wore on a leather belt like a gunslinger. Scars that Plato recognized adorned his arms and face, obviously old shrapnel wounds. "Robert, my dear friend, what brings you through my neck of the woods?" the commander said. A smile warm and welcoming spread across his face, though his eyes were cold and calculating. "Welcome, Bear Commander," Captain Schmidt replied in Vietnamese. He was careful to be respectful, but the tension in the room could be cut with a knife. And that knife was to be Nat. "I am feeling some animosity from your passengers towards me?" the commander asked. "It was a misunderstanding. I would ask that you think kindly on our past working relationship before you decide on any untoward recourse concerning these people," Captain Schmidt said. The commander let out a loud, playful laugh. "I like that relationship. Very formal indeed. But you are correct. You have always been respectful towards me, and are well talked about in this region as one who gives back. So yes, I will take that into consideration before I make any rash decisions," the commander said. He then pointed to Plato. "What makes you and your people so jumpy? Surely you're aware of the sorts of undesirables that patrol the waterways around here." "No reason at all. My colleague was simply trying to get a better look outside." "A simple misunderstanding," Plato said. "Of course, because you are simple people passing through who are not looking for trouble," the commander said. "Do we look harmless?" Luther said, tired of the innuendo. No, you don't. But I'm not a fool who would assume that means trouble for me either," the commander said patiently. "But I also have a business to run, and I haven't climbed to the dizzy heights of pirate commander without taking precautions, so after I take my share of tax, I'll consider letting the captain continue," the commander said, then motioned for his men to let Nat get to his feet. Nat, who had been lying on the floor of the cabin the entire time, was visibly upset at being treated so poorly. As he dusted himself off, he glared at the pirate commander, who was also interested at seeing who the fool from the floor. They locked eyes, and there was a noticeable reaction from the both of them. "You bloated piece of crap!" Nat spat. Plato and the others gasped and readied themselves for a fight, when, without warning, the commander and Nat collided in a hearty embrace, laughter pouring off the two of them. "You skinny little whelp," the commander replied, lifting Nat from the ground in a bear hug. Everyone, including the other pirates, looked on in confusion as the two continued to hug and abuse each other. After a minute, they released each other. Genuine looks of pleasure covered their faces. When Nat saw the expressions of his colleagues, he blushed. "Would you be surprised if I said, 'This is my cousin'? Actually, you have proven to be quite resourceful since we took you in," replied Plato, shaking his head. Took me in? I thought I was in charge? Mocked not? For today you are, said Luther. So who is this beauty? Asked the commander, looking directly at Bion. She's with us, said Plato, subconsciously stepping slightly in front of Bion. Oh, said the commander, laughing loudly. I understand. Winking at Plato. With Nat on board, the commander dismissed his men back to their boats. The tension felt only moments earlier now gone. Captain Schmidt ordered his cook to prepare an early breakfast, and they now all sat on the deck breaking bread together. Plato noted that despite the commander's fearsome exterior, he was now nothing but smiles since being reunited with his cousin, which Plato suspected was a relationship in name only. So, Commander, what's your story? Plato asked. I think we can dispense with the formal title. Please call me Huin. If you haven't already guessed, Nat and I are not really cousins. We were soldiers together, Huin said. We both worked for the Australian forces in Phuoc Tui province from 69 to 72 as scouts, Nat added. We were both farm boys looking for adventure and to make a change, Huin said. After 72, we returned home, or so I thought, Nat said with a smirk, indicating his current profession. After returning home, I discovered my family's lands destroyed by bombings and the family missing, Huin said. Luther shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I spent months searching for them without success. I eventually stumbled upon this group of misfits and miscreants. And now you're their leader, Plato stated. This occupation has a high turnover rate of personnel. My predecessor was a highly unstable individual whom I only knew as Gut. He died from a drug overdose. He was capable of great violence, but since taking over we have been quite fair in our dealings, Huin said. I can attest to that, Captain Schmidt said. I'm sorry to hear of your troubles, Nat said. Huin nodded. So what brings you into this murky part of the world? Huin said, changing the subject. Plato looked towards Nat, who nodded back. I realize your close association with Nat, but you'll forgive me if I don't give you the full details of our quest, Plato said, trying to word his intentions delicately. Quest. Well, you've definitely piqued my interest. But because of Nat, I'll respect your wishes, Huin said. We're attempting to thwart a plot involving General Tun, the Viper, and the Wraith, Plato said. Huin tensed up, but remained silent. The general is attempting to take control of the country, Bion insisted. Huin ignored her, instead focusing on Plato. Even if I believe what you say is true, why involve yourself in our politics? Do you work for the government? Huin said firmly. When we got involved in this, initially it was accidental, to avenge the death of a friend, Luther said boldly. Revenge. Now that's something I can understand. You see, the Viper is a person of interest to me, Huin said. We're listening. Plato indicated Huin should continue. Although I wasn't there, I have ironclad testimony that the Viper was responsible for the death of my baby brother. I may not know what happened to the rest of my family, but I've sworn that the Viper will meet his death at my hands. Huin growled. I'm sorry for your loss, but grateful that we share a common foe, Plato said, and produced a parchment from his bag, carefully unrolling the monk's map for Huin to view. It was a rough map of the region, indicating the river they now sailed. We are looking for this spot on the map, although none of us has any clue to what lies there or how it may be of any assistance, Plato said. He then pointed to a small point with a single image, a round circle with runes within. This is becoming rather fortuitous for you, Huin said enigmatically. How so? Plato asked. Not only do I know how to get there, but I also know what that image means, Huyn said. Everyone was silent as they waited for the scarred pirate to elaborate on this. It's a rune that indicates the presence of a Hmong shaman, and I know her personally. 3 hours later, they were speeding down a stretch of river that looked like the fabled river Styx that flowed into the underworld in Greek mythology. Most of the trees that lined the banks looked either dead or dying. They passed the occasional carcass of a bloated dead body or a burnt-out boat that was snagged on submerged branches. The air was abnormally quiet. They had left Captain Schmidt behind an hour ago, as his vessel had been unable to enter the branch of the river where they now needed to go. The captain had expressed his apologies, but promised to remain in position until their return. So now Plato and his team were scattered upon the various small craft that made up Huyn's fleet. How much further is the place where this shaman is located? Plato asked. Not much further. It's literally around the next bend, Huyn replied. True to his word, they rounded the next turn, and the first thing Plato thought was that they had arrived in hell. He couldn't explain it, but the area ahead of him seemed to hold darkness even though the sun had been up for hours. A rickety dock greeted them as their boats glided in. Huyn's men cautiously tied their boats off, but refused to leave the safety of their vessels, a couple going so far as to make the sign of the evil eye in an attempt to ward off bad luck. Leaving the superstitious pirates behind, they climbed the dock, which groaned under their collective weight. Plato was surprised to see Huyn following behind, his expression grave. They didn't need to ask the way as there was only a single trail leading from the docks. The trees that lined the path were black and dead. Effigies and symbols hung from their branches. The crooked trail went for several hundred meters before coming out onto a small opening. Dear God, Bian gasped as everyone stared at the home of the shaman. Small in size it was, but it made up for this in grotesque ugliness. It was of plain timber construction with a thatch roof. There were more effigies and vile-looking sculptures that Plato assumed were there to ward off evil spirits. The roof was covered in hundreds of ravens that made no sound, only watched with their black eyes. As they approached, they could see that the majority of the images had been fashioned from human bones. Plato looked towards Huyn for a response, but only received a blank, stony expression in reply. Luther and Plato appeared to be about to draw their weapons. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Huyn advised, but wouldn't elaborate. Luther shrugged and reholstered his pistol. I suppose we have to trust the pirate, Luther said. And hope that our instincts are on the money, Plato said, regretfully following suit. Huyn halted the group and then stepped forward, holding up his hands in a subservient manner. Cray Sue. It's Huyn. I have brought visitors who wish to speak to you, Huyn called out. There was silence, so deep that Plato thought they had wasted their time. Then an ancient voice croaked back. It made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. I know. I have been anticipating their arrival. They have come to speak to me about the 4 immortals. Come in. The shaman beckoned. Taking a deep breath, Plato entered the shack, followed closely by the others. Inside the shack, it was painfully dark, except for the glow of a dying fire in the center of the room. The air thick and dank with the small plumes of smoke that drifted towards the ceiling and the smell of old herbs and spices. There were next to no decorations or furniture except for a large teak trunk in one corner. Its vast lid swung open, and what Plato first thought to be a pile of dirty clothes draped over it, until it moved. Take a seat, an ancient voice croaked. What Plato had initially assumed was dirty laundry stood up and shambled towards the group. Kray Su, the shaman, was tiny, barely 4 feet in height. She wore a dirty shawl, its color long since gone. It was simply a dark charcoal shade. Her hair was a dirty gray tangle that looked more like a dead fern, and her skin was only a slightly lighter shade than her hair, the wrinkles so many and deep that they looked like the topographic map of a desert. But it was when Plato locked eyes with the old crone that he knew real shock. 2 of the bluest, clearest eyes stared back. In that one instant, he saw intelligence, power, and insanity glaring back. "There's no seats," Nat chimed in, breaking the moment instantly. Plato looked away briefly, thankful for the respite. "What do you call those?" the Kray Su grunted, pointing to 5 stone tablets that surrounded the fire. "Wait," Plato said, feeling suddenly uneasy. "I really don't know what's going on here, but all this feels wrong and a waste of our time." "Silence," the Kray Su squawked, her voice filled with energy. At that same moment, the dying fire burst into life. Everyone jumped. "Sit down. I've been waiting quite some time for your arrival. Before we begin, I require payment. Any knowledge gained must come at a price." "We have no money," Plato replied. "No, but you have something? Pretty, maybe? Valuable?" the old crone hinted. Luther's eyes went wide. "Yes, the black one knows." "What is she talking about?" Plato asked. Luther ignored the question as he removed something from his pocket. Holding it up, they all saw the green jewel from the first cave. The shaman clapped excitedly. Yes, yes, that will do," she crowed. Luther tossed the green gem, and in one movement the shaman caught it and tucked it away. Plato looked toward Luther, who shrugged back with a, "What can it hurt?" look, although there was a fear present in his eyes that Plato didn't like. Plato and the members of his party each took a seat on one of the stone tablets, facing towards the fire, with their legs crossed like school children. "You have a right to be afraid. Not of me, but rather the forces at work which are controlling your destiny," the Kray Su said. "As I said before, I don't believe in all this magic and destiny crap," Plato said, attempting to control his temper. "No, but it believes in you. The forces at work have brought you all together today, for a reason," the Kray Su said. "And what's that?" Luther asked. "To hear my words. You have all come from different backgrounds and paths. The lost warrior, always searching for answers, but never asking the real question," the Kray Su said, and tossed a small stone rune on a leather strap to Plato, who studied it intently. "The foreign soldier with a broken soul, believing he is beyond redemption." She handed a rune to Luther. "The pirate with the heart of gold, demanding revenge." Another to Huin. "The farmer who has forgotten his roots." Nat received his without looking up. "And finally, the descendant of the Maid of Heaven," the Kray Su said, but instead gave Bian a gem of stunning red glow, fashioned into a figure of a woman. It hung from a chain of sparkling gold. She took it. "Wear them, as they are meant only for you." There was no argument as they all placed their runes on. The Kray Su held what looked like a bouquet of dried and dead flowers and herbs. Moving towards the center, she carefully fed the end of the bouquet to the hungry fire. It didn't ignite, but rather smoldered like a fine cigar. The Kray Su blew on it, and the bouquet glowed. A heavy green smoke filtered out. The old shaman slowly waved it around as she circled the seated group, the smoke growing thicker and thicker. 5 is a powerful number. Nature and regeneration are represented by this number. The pentagram in magic is a 5-pointed star. The four immortals and the Jade Cup represent 5, and so too is the number of this group, the Cray Sioux said. Plato could feel his eyes growing heavy, his head drifting forward, till his chin touched his chest, and his eyes closed completely. Barely a second did he drift off to sleep when he snapped himself awake only to find he was not in the old shack of a witch, but standing within the depths of a mighty rainforest. Plato looked around for his companions, but it was clear that he was alone. "Luther, Bion, not!" Plato's voice echoed across the expanse, but there was no reply. He touched the large leaf of a giant fern and jerked it back, his fingers wet from condensation. Plato looked around, attempting to get a fix on his location, when his gaze was drawn to the lack of sky overhead. Instead, what he saw was rock. The rainforest that Plato was currently standing in was located within a cave. A horn trumpeted in the distance. It was long and booming. Plato started running in its direction. Plato arrived at the entrance of a large stone temple, its appearance in the jungle sudden and in complete contrast with the thick vegetation. The temple was a masterpiece of art and architecture. Giant slabs of stone intricately carved, detailing the deities of Vietnamese mythology, large steps leading up into its opening. Plato started to walk towards its entrance as if something were drawing him in, and as his feet reached the steps, a voice in the distance called out, "Plato!" He turned, then blacked out. "Plato. Plato," Bion said. Plato opened his eyes and stared up at Bion, who was nursing his head in her lap. Luther, Nat, and Huyen were also staring down. "You all right, bro?" Luther asked. Plato sat up, feeling suddenly self-conscious. "What happened?" Plato asked. "The witch, shaman, or whatever she calls herself, spaced us out on her hippie weed and then she took off." "Everyone check your pockets," Nat said. "She's gone?" Plato asked and looked around for the first time since waking. The fire was dead, and the witch and her chest were long gone. "Did anyone see where she went?" "We literally woke minutes before you did," Luther replied. "Whatever was in those burning flowers knocked us out." "I had the weirdest dream," Bion said. "Dream? What was in your dream?" Plato asked. "A forest and a temple," Bion said, trying to recall the details. "The forest was in a cave," Luther added, and they all looked in his direction. "I saw it too," Plato said, and looked at Nat and Huyen, who nodded in agreement. "So it was a drug-induced vision?" Nat asked. "Yes and no. We all shared it. We're not missing anything. The witch wanted us to see the temple. I'm sure it's the resting place of the Jade Cup, and for some reason all I can think of is a name," Plato said. "The Valley of the Immortals," Bion said. "But where is it located?" Nat asked. "I think I can help with that," Huyen said. That seals today's tale in shadows. We hope Plato Wyngard and the Valley of the Immortals has drawn you deeper into its enigma. Return soon to Crow's Quills books, where the next chapter awaits, whispering secrets yet untold.